Hello, and welcome back to Renee the Curious. I'm Renee, and I'm curious. And today I'm going to share what I've learned in the last 2, 3 years regarding AI in software development, specifically, but more generally, how it's impacted other aspects of my day-to-day work. And you perhaps found the same in your work life experience. When I was originally looking to outline this video, I was going to call it How I Code in 2026. But when I look at what I do day to day, AI has helped me to do far more than simply program or generate lines of code. It helps me design, write better, and learn to become a better writer, build, and all kinds of other things. And so this video is called How I Create in 2026. And I hope you find it useful. I've learned a lot and I'm excited to see what we can do more of in 2026 as this AI development accelerates both the quantity and honestly quality of the work that we can accomplish. In this video, we're going to cover 3 things. First, environment and tools. Now, this is a big one, and it's both a blessing and a curse or a malediction in the sense that we are spoiled for choice. Which models do you use? Which one do you like? Which editor do you use? What browsers? What testing software do you, there are so many options and choices, and many of them are excellent. In fact, I would argue most of them are just fine, but you maybe have your preference. And I've come to develop certain intuition with regards to choice of tools and environments and other things. And I'll share that with you. And maybe that'll be helpful. Second, once we have our workspace, as it were, and our tools, we're going to look at workflow and specifically the flow part of work, where when we have everything set up just right for us, and we get into a flow of designing and coding and imagining and problem solving, what that looks like and what it can look like for you, what it has looked like for me in the past many months. And then finally, I'm going to close out with a little bit of perspective, which is, and I covered this in a talk in Victoria a couple months ago, Prompt Victoria, when AI does everything, what do you do? And so although we are perhaps personally writing less code, we're using models to generate graphics, design, marketing, etc. What's left for us is really imagination and thinking about if we can build anything, what should we build? And so perspective is where we'll end off, but let's start with environment and tools. Now, often as developers or writers or designers or architects, whatever, we like what we know in terms of tools and we use what we like. And so it often becomes a Ford versus Chevy or Tesla versus Rivian or Windows versus Mac, whatever. We're not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to show you what I'm using and why. And often that decision changes over time. But let's, as they say on YouTube, let's jump into it. So first, environment and tools. And I'll jump back just a moment and share with you why I'm doing this video. In the last 2 years, I have been able to, thanks to AI and remaining curious and trying new things, develop a number of full stack web applications that are used by thousands and in some cases tens of thousands of people and hundreds of organizations daily. And these applications are not just code, but they're designed. They solve problems in dental offices. They make patients safer. They let people who work in the energy sector find directions to important locations quickly and conveniently, organize games with friends, look at Alberta wells, and car sharing or carpooling, ride sharing is one that I started working on a few weeks ago, and I'm excited to I'll do this in a video later, share what I've learned in developing this. So amidst all of these different applications that I developed as a solo developer, there have been a number of takeaways with regards to what my environment should look like in order to help me both accomplish more and enjoy working as a developer, and to some extent, designer, writer, etc. So what are those things? Well, let's start with browsers. Now, what browser do you use? Maybe the one that comes with the default one in Windows or Mac, if it's Safari or Edge. Maybe you downloaded Chrome. I use for development quite a bit Brave. And the reason why I like Brave, number one, is that it focuses on privacy, speed, and ad blocking out of the gate. It has a bunch of other cool features, but instead of Chrome, I use Brave. Now, how is it different? Other than that, it isn't actually. It basically is Chrome without user tracking and less ads in your face, which I think is good. But under the hood, it's using Chromium. So if you're developing for Chrome users, you can use Brave. You don't have to, but that's another one I use. I also use Firefox. Why? Because it uses a different rendering engine for the JavaScript. And if you want to see what your web application looks like in different browsers, you have to use different browsers. Now, I know there are simulators. Where are they? Here we go, mobile simulator, that will simulate what a web app or website looks like on an iPhone or an iPad. And they're great, but that's a simulation using an existing rendering engine. Also, Safari is worth using. And finally, some of you, if you're on Mac, I really recommend, if you develop web applications, to use the Xcode Simulator, which is pixel perfect representation of what your app will look like on an iPad or an iPhone. And you can change the orientation. You can do all kinds of things to really get a sense of how the application will look and behave, no matter what device you're on. So for browsers, Brave is my primary one. Also use Firefox and Safari. One of the nice things about using multiple browsers in development is that if you're testing multi-user authentication and collaboration, it sort of overcomes this issue where you have a session in one browser that gets clobbered when you try to sign in with another user. So if you're doing multi-user testing, it's quite nice. Next, editors. Most people have used, and I have used for many years, VS Code, and it's great. Or you might be using Cursor or Windsurf, which are forks of VS Code. Now, VS Code, there's nothing wrong with it. However, it isn't a speedball. It's based on Electron, which uses Chromium, which is the browser rendering engine under the hood. So every editor that uses VS Code as a fork is using under the hood Electron, and you can Google this, but the performance implications mean that when you're loading large files, it takes a ton of resources from your computer. It will slow down if you open up a lot of files, and it's just not, it's not fast, but it is really good. What do I use instead? Instead, I use Zed. And Zed is very similar to VS Code. It has a file explorer, great Git integration with all of the LLMs, which you can configure down here. Of course, I'm using Opus 4.5 because, in my humble opinion, it is absolutely and without question the very best for software engineering and, quite frankly, many other things. But Zed is great, and it's written in Rust, which isn't why automatically it's an excellent editor, but it does contribute to the fact that it is incredibly fast. You can open a 200, 500 megabyte text file instantly in Zed, and your memory consumption on a Mac or PC or Linux is going to be far less than it is with VS Code, which will probably blow up at that point. Zed versus VS Code. Yeah, in a nutshell, it's just very fast. And Zed has never crashed on me. I'm not saying it won't crash on you. That's not a guarantee, but it is extremely good. Yeah, and it's written in Rust, which there are reasons why it's stable and fast. We won't get into the whole Rust thing, but Zed is an excellent editor, and I love it. And it's very themable too, like VS Code. Anyways, Terminals. If you're on a Mac, by default, you get a terminal called terminal. And it's totally fine. It works. However, I don't use terminal when I'm running my applications in the terminal. I use something called Ghostty. And here's where Ghostty is sitting at the moment in a different workspace. Why Ghostty? Well, let's ask the Google. It is, interestingly, coincidentally, also written in Rust. It is extremely fast, and it's just really nice. And when we get to workflow, I'll show you how I use terminals, multiple terminals, when running multiple agents or sub-agents, and it just works really well. Now, having said that, like in VS Code, you can use your favorite LLM, wiring it up in Klein or something native, or you do this in Cursor. Why would you not run the model in the editor? Which you can, and I've done it in VS Code, or rather, sorry, in Z, Command R, and I can just prompt my LLM here and it does its thing. Well, part of it's just aesthetics, I think. Running in a strict terminal is just a little cleaner, less noise. And because Ghostty is written in Rust, it's fast for the LLMs to do all of its tool calls, reading files and doing greps and bash commands. It just feels quicker than running even in a fast editor like Z, which has, when you are instructing the models to do what you want, it's operating within this UI. And so I tend to keep my editors for editing and my terminal for agentic coding. But your mileage may vary. That's what I've been using, and it's nice. Another thing that I continue to use is Claude Desktop. Now, why is that? Well, when you start a new idea and you are not in a project, this is a great safe sandbox in which to sort of explore an idea. And what I'll often do, and I've done this like a lot, is, like migrating from one database to another. A friend of mine was asking me how to do that. And so I don't have access to their repo. But I was curious, like, okay, migrating from SQLite to Postgres, what are the steps? What are the gotchas, et cetera, et cetera. And so Claude Desktop is a great sort of notepad in which to transcribe some thoughts. And then at the end of the conversation, I'll often say, just generate, numbered list format requirements. And it does it. I can email it to him, send him as a text. Claude Desktop continues to be a great resource. And of course, all of your chats here are saved. So I can look back, 1 year ago at something I was thinking about or working on and get access to it. So really super handy. These are sandboxed separately from the chats that you'll have in Claude Code, which we'll get to later, but highly recommend Claude Desktop. Now, let's move on to Claude Code. Claude Code, as you know, runs in typically the terminal. It could run in your editor, but most people, including the creator of Claude Code, from what I can tell, Boris Cherny, runs it in the terminal. And it's great. Now, which model do you use? That is really up to you. For example, here, I can say model, and I could choose the default, which is Opus 4.5, which, interestingly, the creator of Claude Code, I just saw today, is what the model he uses for pretty much everything. However, in some cases, you might want to use Haiku 4.5, which is the small model. And as Anthropic shows here, it's the fastest one. There are reasons for this. The small models typically have fewer parameters, and many of them are quantized. I'm not sure about Haiku 4.5, what level of quantization that they've performed on the weights or whatever they are, but it runs really quick. And so if you're creating a sub-agent to, for example, read through a project, look at all of the files that, all the TypeScript files to see if they're properly typed. You could create a sub-agent that you explicitly tell it to use Haiku, which will get through it much faster. And then when reporting back to the orchestrator agent, Opus 4.5, who's more of the thinking model, you'll get both speed and quality, and you'll use fewer tokens because Haiku is very lightweight. Now, as for stacks, tech stacks, I absolutely love SvelteKit with TypeScript. Now, if you're using React or Angular or Vue, you might not used SvelteKit. I highly recommend checking out SvelteKit if you're developing both full stack web applications, even static websites. You could use Astro. It's fast. It's React-based, JSX. I'm not a fan, but it is very quick. It's barely any faster than Svelte for a static site. They're almost neck and neck. So if you're going to learn one thing in 2026 and you're curious, learn SvelteKit. It's awesome. Why with TypeScript? The models love TypeScript. The ability for the models to understand the kinds of types returned in an application helps it to reason on and test your code more efficiently. At least that's been my experience. What about UI? Well, up until a few weeks ago or months ago, I was pretty much not interested in trying different UI libraries on top of Svelte. I felt they added weight without really doing much for me. I've changed my mind on this with one project called, where's my browser? Svelte Shad CN. All right. So you've heard of Shad CN. It's a design system. And yeah, that's why a lot of the websites we create now all look the same, at least if you use the default settings. They don't have to, but Svelte Shad CN is amazing. And if you look at, for example, here is a site that I started working on a couple years ago. I still develop it. It uses Bulma CSS, which is a CSS library. And it's great. But just CSS. It's not really a component library, although it can seem that way. But it's a little bit on the old side, and modern web development has moved beyond that. And even the way the apps that I've developed that use Bulma CSS, they sort of look kind of similar in a way that maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure. But let's see here. But here's RidePost. And I just like the way the application works, and it has extremely good mobile support. So if you make this window narrower, you can see the navigation bar for what would be a phone at the bottom appear. If you make it wider for desktop, it just works. And so Shad CN has been a great, and the Svelte version of Shad CN was, so they ported it to Svelte, has been fantastic. Another technology that I highly recommend that is part of my environment is Supabase. And that's not what I want. Supabase.io. Oh, there we go. Why are you guys down here? There we go. So Supabase is two things. It's a few things. It's a database. It is an authentication system. It is a storage option if you need to store images or files, and it does a bunch of other stuff. And you can run it in the cloud for free or almost next to nothing, or you can self-host. I self-host almost all of my applications. It costs me nothing per month. Supabase is, I think, neck and neck with SvelteKit as my favorite back-end technology I've ever come across. It is absolutely fantastic. Edge functions, storage, real-time. This means subscriptions on databases so that if you have, for example, a messaging application like here, you can, as you're typing, the other person sees your message. And so that is something that Supabase handles for free automatically. Finally, another technology option, we all have to deal, sadly, with email. and at times in our applications. And so Resend is a great service similar to SendGrid and Twilio, Mailgun, Postmark, except it's super simple, it's very inexpensive, and it just works. And finally, in my stack, in coding, generally speaking, I use the most powerful model from Anthropic, which is Opus 4.5. But in many applications now, what I'm beginning to do more and more is develop AI inside the application. So for example, here we're looking at Torxon Energy. They're an oil and gas company based in Calgary. They have lots of wells, 30,000. I can ask in this application that I developed a few months ago for an analysis of this company and its wells in the area, and this will do web search. And I'm using Haiku on the server to do all of this orchestration. And in a few seconds, it's doing a lot of work. It will give me a report. And so this is using existing data within the application, but then sort of corralling other data, financial reports, and here we go, that tells me or a user in a nutshell more about this. So, we're using AI to create applications, and I think this is going to be a big deal in 2026, at least it is proving to be for me in 2025, putting AI inside of our applications where if we have data here already, what does it mean? So yes, we can get the data, fine, it's like a Google search, but now we're able to make our applications intelligent and useful in ways that heretofore was not possible. And so that's an application for Haiku, which again is very inexpensive and it's fast. And so if we want to do analysis inside a web app or a website, that's what we do. Now, back to, where were we? Yeah, so we looked at environment and tools. And, these are a few of my favorite things, as Julie Andrews might say, if you were a software developer. But now I want to look at, workflow. So how am I using some of these tools in my day-to-day work life? And like I mentioned at the beginning, I was originally going to call this, how I code, but it's really more than coding. Coding is a fun part that if you're a developer, you can appreciate, but even if you are a developer, you're probably also using AI in a whole bunch of other non-coding related disciplines or fields of work. So let's look at that. So Claude Code, example uses. So here's one. So we're going to go back to our Ghostty terminal, which is wonderful. MCP servers are now just over a year old. Anthropic released a spec and their own and MCP implementation last 2024 November, and now they're everywhere. What's an MCP server? It's a way for an AI model like Claude or Gemini or whatever, ChatGPT, Codex 5.2, whatever they call it now, to communicate and work with other things. So for example, in this application, Canada Well Finder, so I showed you how I can analyze well sites. Canada Well Finder is running in Supabase on-prem. I host it myself in my own data center. And by configuring a Supabase MCP server, I can say this, using Supabase MCP, can you identify which, if any, tables need RLS rules or improvements to them? Now, you may not know what this is. It doesn't really matter. The point is, when you're programming in an application, normally there is like a hard wall between your editor and the database. You can't simply say, migrate these tables or add indexes or is it fast? But with MCP, you can. And we'll ask it to do that right now. And as it's working, I'm going to show you another application. Okay, so it's going to now go and using the MCP server. By the way, MCP server, you think it's like sitting somewhere else? No, the MCP server is actually on my machine, on my laptop. And that's the intermediary between my Claude Code session and the Supabase instance that's running in the data center. And so it's asking me list RLS policies, sure, whatever. And so that's pretty cool. Another thing though that is non-coding related is analyzing business assumptions. Now, I'm going to give you an exact example. This is real. This was like 2 days ago. Okay, so I'm developing this ride sharing / carpooling application. And one of the questions I had is when I launch this soon to help people on Vancouver Island to start with, to share rides to and from the airport and maybe other places, it occurred to me that maybe starting with all of these locations immediately is too much because there's no content. There are no people posting rides in the beginning. And so if you search for a ride and you don't find any rides, or you're a driver and there's no one who wants to be a passenger, it can be a bit of a bummer. And so I asked this question to okay, so yes, I'm still learning CSS. Where's the question? Oh, yeah, here. I like the list of locations. So I have in the application, if we go to Z, and constants, locations, where are they? There we go. So I have all of these locations. All right. So this is great. Maybe we'll have all of these later. But to start with, my question was, I wonder if to start, they should be pared down to the most essential and or likely places to benefit from this service. Thoughts? Ultrathink. By the way, if you're using Claude Code, this is a secret keyword. And also it's cool because it sort of makes it into this like little rainbow thing when you type it. Like here, Ultrathink. See? I love that company. So first, it does some research. And one of the things that I try to do, no, I don't try, I do it, it's important, is include in every project application a comprehensive list of documents. So there's your Claude MD file, or if you're using other not as good models, in my opinion, they'll call this agent.md. It's basically the same thing. It tells the model when you start up any chat session, it reads this whole document, and it gives it some context to understand the sort of breadth and width, that's the same, length and width of your project. And then it can make better decisions. But there's also other documents that I like to keep. In any case, some of them are to do with features, competitive framing. There's a service in France years ago that did something similar. It's very successful. And so that's often useful to put in documentation. And so it will go through and analyze this. So this is not a coding activity. Oh, don't ask again. Yeah. This is a business strategy analysis. And, look at what it says here. With 27 locations, you're fragmenting demand across 729 possible route combinations. 27 squared. If you have 50 early users posting trips, the probability of finding a match. And this is what I was worried about. I thought maybe it's too much. Maybe we just start with a few things, like a few locations. And that's basically what Claude Code using Opus 4.5 did. Now you'll notice here that while I'm describing this, this Claude Code running in a different project is finished. And I'll just take a small pause sidebar. This is part of my workflow. I will run Ghostty in 4 projects at once. Down here is the, running the app. And up here is my Claude Code conversation. So I can see it running up here. That's what I do. I find this to be really good. I saw something today from Anthropic where Boris Cherny, pat myself on the back, just a coincidence, actually does something similar. He runs Claude Code in 5 different tabs or terminals, because while it's very good, it's not instantaneous when you're asking it to do a refactor or whatever. And so there's this sort of new experience of like, set it off, have it go work, and then do a little context switch to something else. Yeah, and then here's another nice thing that Claude Code does. I love this, is it will prompt me. Yeah, it's prompting me. We're thinking about, yes, fix the API keys policies. Okay, so, just fantastic. Yeah. So here we have a reduced list of locations for ridepost.app. And you know what? Excellent. Proceed. And so Claude Code in this context will now go through ridepost and likely, let's see here. Where did those locations go? There we go. Likely revise this. So we'll give it a moment and yeah. Auto accept edits. By the way, this is worth sharing in case you're new to Claude Code. Claude Code and many of the other models, they have a means to sort of protect you from yourself or from itself from making changes that you don't approve of. And it's pretty good knowing which is which. And generally, I and most people who use Claude Code auto accept edits. And if you don't like the edits it makes to the code base, just don't git commit and push to main or to whatever branch you're on. And there is also a less restrictive policy called bypass permissions. I don't recommend that. You want to stay in somewhat control, even if you don't read every single line of code that it generates. You don't want it to like rm-rf your project to reduce lines of code. So that's yeah, and so we see here in the other session for Canada Well Finder, it's fix some RLS policies, and now we're done here. So, and there we go. So fewer locations. Now when I go back to here, let's go to localhost because I haven't pushed this to prod. I'll browse trips, post a trip. Well, I have to be here. So we see just a few locations and then other. Oh, that was clever. It added an escape hatch. So this could be like miscellaneous. Okay, so that's great. So this is how my workflow looks like, what it looks like in 2026. And another thing that you can use Claude Code for, or I'm sorry, Claude Desktop, is simply in analyzing stuff. For example, if you are managing DNS, and let's find, right. So here's some DNS records. I had a problem this week, and what I simply did is I exported my DNS record. So DNS test, and then go to Claude Desktop. There we go. And we'll go to a new chat and drop in this export of these DNS records. All right. So if you're like me, this is not totally my wheelhouse. I can create A records and CNAME and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, some of the SPF, DCOM and DMARC and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So yeah, it found some little, not huge problems, but yeah, some issues. And so again, is this coding? No, this is taking some code and having a super smart DNS guru who has been, working on the internet since 1970, look at a file and instantly analyze it for issues. So yeah, Claude Desktop, great use of that. Another use case for these models is building scripts. So for example, in if you have to build, as I sometimes do, build VMs, build servers for applications, you might write a script. I use Claude Code to write this script, and I can do it either in the terminal or I can do it agentically in here inside the editor. And at the end of the day, it creates these scripts, and now I can set up a virtual machine running Supabase on-prem in about 10 minutes. Normally, it would have taken me like a few hours. And then if you don't do it very often, you forget what the steps are. So another use of Claude Code or Claude Desktop, you could do some of this in Claude Desktop for generating build scripts. Now, another application for these models is design. And recently, as of like yesterday, I was trying to come up with a, where are we here? Yeah. A nice icon for Ride Post. And I was using Claude Code to sort of design an idea, but it wasn't great. And I'll just show you what I did. So create an app icon for a new website, Ride Post. And so I upload a screenshot of what it looks like currently without the icon. So it gets a sense of the color scheme, layout, design, typography. And so, yeah, it can figure out what some of the colors are. And it worked for a while. And let's see, is there an example of what it eventually created? It created an artifact, which is using code to create the design. It wasn't great though. And so, yeah, I'm just honest with it. It's okay, but kind of boring. I like to incorporate one or two of the other website colors. Create an effective prompt for me to use in other generative AI tools. So this is something that I find really helpful. If sometimes, even in Claude Code or Claude Desktop, it doesn't do what you want, and you want to take your work and put it into another generative AI application, it can create the prompt, and it did. And it created this really nice prompt and, where I might use it. And so I told it I actually have an account on Replicate. And let's see, do I have, yeah. And so I put the prompt in here that it gave me, and it created some nice little designs, in this style that sort of matches the website. And then before I created this video, or I guess I'm still creating this video, I had it create those slides for it. Similarly, using prompting in Claude and then generating the image here. So the AIs, they understand each other. They know what Midjourney expects for a good prompt to create a good result, a good image out. And so, sometimes it's a matter of using the AIs in concert together in order to achieve better results. All right. What's another use case of AI in not pure coding? Well, it's actually commit messages. So here, if we go back to Ride Post, so we created, let's go to get. So we changed, the locations. Remember that? We reduced the number of locations. And so I don't know about you, but I just don't love writing commit messages. However, they're important if you are working on a team with other developers, and also actually for the AIs themselves, because they can look through your Git history and see the progress of work and what it means, and et cetera, et cetera. So in Zed, the other editors do this too. I can just generate my commit message with a click. Oh, actually I need it to stage first. Yeah, so good enough. And commit and push. So that's pretty nice, pretty easy. Another use of these models in development or in administration is when we're using the terminal to do things on other servers. So for example, if I go to the server, the VM that runs Supabase for ride post, using Warp, now this is not Ghosty, this is the Warp terminal. It is an agentic environment like Claude Code, but different insofar as it can actually read and write output inside a terminal or SSH session. And I won't give you a demo. I'm probably not like here. Yeah, so here I'm turning on agent mode. And if I was trying to figure out how to troubleshoot a server remotely, it basically is reading what I see and is able to offer suggestions in terms of commands, and really, really useful. So I like Ghosty for development, but for doing terminal work, especially the remote servers, Warp is a really good option too. And you can change the model you're using. It doesn't have to use just Anthropic models, although they're the best. But yeah. Here's another one, Sentry MCP. So remember I told you about how I'm using Sentry, not Sentry, Supabase MCP for the database? Well, Sentry MCP is, well, if you don't know what Sentry is awesome. And actually, Sentry, yeah, sign in. Okay, I'm going to skip Sentry for now. It basically lets your Claude Code session communicate with Sentry, which does error tracking, and then resolve bugs on your behalf. Check it out. It's a really great one. Another thing that you can use Claude Code for, and this is coding related, is making dashboards. So if you have an application, most developers I know, at least speaking for myself, don't love making dashboards. But if you have an application that already exists, these models are extremely good at it, especially Claude Code. So you have an application, there's all of these tables, it has access to Supabase MCP. You can go in and simply say, create for me an admin dashboard for my application, to show me all of the users and who subscribed and how many, et cetera, and walk away, come back an hour later, and it's done. And then you maybe tweak it, but really powerful use of Claude Code. And yeah, this is coding related, so not everything is non-coding. Finally, in my workflow, updating dependencies. So for example, let's say that's an existing one. Here, let's go here. Look at package.json and suggest which packages should be updated. Now, one thing, I'm going to say plan mode. I always start my chats in plan, and sometimes I switch back and forth between working in plan, or what do they call it, accept edits, and then I'll do ultrathink. And so here, you might have this situation where there's a security vulnerability in some NPM package, and you want to address it. But, in NPM land, one dependency will have another dependency, and it can be a little fragile. So here is where Claude Code is really your friend. And so it's going to look through package.json. I don't think it should find much in this application, because I think I did this a few weeks ago, but we'll see. But here it goes working. And while it works, I'll share with you one other area that you can really benefit from with Claude Code, and it is respect to coding. And that is when you're doing a massive migration. So I have an application, here it is, where it's an old app. I started writing it 13 years ago. It's in PHP and uses jQuery, and yeah, it's just, I want to have a fresh start, and I'm working on it now. One of the things that you can do is take that project, put the existing project in a subdirectory, let's call it V3, and create a new one called V4. And then Claude init, tell it, I want to migrate from this former stack, look at the application, figure out what it's using, what it needs, into, in my case, SvelteKit, Supabase, using Resend for transactional email, and ShadCN for UI. And it will take a while, but it will go through the old application and then create documentation in /docs for the new one, and then create a plan and work through that plan. And so when you're doing a massive migration and you don't want to change the old application with respect to hopefully breaking it, Claude Code is an incredibly powerful way to achieve that. Okay, so here we go. Checking package JSON. So yeah, there are some updates. And this is really nice too. Risk low, safe to update. Yeah, major rewrite. So Vite went to version 7 in Svelte 2.x, may not be compatible. Yeah, this has bitten me before. So that's another use case for using Claude Code. All right, so that was, I don't even know how long this video is now, but we've reached, I think, the end of workflow. And now, very briefly, I want to talk about perspective. And I think this is something we need to do fairly often. Things are moving so fast. We're able to generate lots of code. And contrary to what I've heard at conferences sometimes, code quality is not the problem. It can be. Code quality can be a problem if people are generating the code. So blaming the AIs or models, I think, is not responsible or quite honest or accurate. What is important is to pay attention and to care, whether we are writing the code or we're getting these models to do it for us. And one of the things that can help us to do that is when we're developing software and it does something that you're kind of amazed at, ask it to explain it to you. Why did you do this? Explain it to me like I'm a junior developer, even if you're a senior. I like it when it explains things to me simply, and then it will often offer to elaborate. And so that's one thing. Another thing that I think is important with perspective is not to change our tools too often, but also don't get stuck in the past. Don't remain stuck in our ways. VS Code is a fine editor. It's the most popular one, I think, probably easy to say. And the standard terminal in macOS is fine. But you know what? Try Zed. Download Ghostty. They're free. And try them for a few days. You might love it, as a lot of people have. And yeah, try new things, but don't try them all the time. You have to get work done, right? A third point, third final thought is it's okay to wonder. I wonder, but let's learn. So with these reasoning models, we're able to answer our questions really quickly. But it's not just a question of knowing the answer, but really what does it mean for our application? I don't know if that makes sense, what our purpose is. But instead of only generating code, I think we're come to the point now where we can become basically business analysts or designers, even if we don't consider ourselves designers. And our job description is going to expand massively, as it already has and will continue to. But what we continue to need is curiosity, good taste, and a measure of imagination. Now, the last thought that I'll share with you, and this is just a wild one that I've had, is because we're generating more code, even though we're not writing as much, it means that we have to think more. We're thinking more now than we did in the past as developers, writers, designers, and architects. And we're thinking not just about code, probably less about code, but more about business objectives, user experience, etc. And frankly, this can be draining because we're making a lot of decisions that are a little bit outside our natural wheelhouse. It can be exhausting. And so as we watch Claude Code, gaze outside your window, go for a walk, pet your dog or your iguana, hug a friend, Pay a sincere compliment to someone who doesn't expect it, but perhaps needs one. Get enough sleep. Don't watch too much YouTube, except for this channel. And imagine something cool. And then go build it. Thanks for your time. Have a great day. I'm Renee the Curious.